Imagine a shy girl who trusted the wrong people at the wrong moment, thinking she was safe in what should have been a private space, only to discover her most vulnerable moment was being filmed for the entertainment of cruel classmates who thought they could destroy her without consequences. But what these bullies didn't know was that behind her quiet demeanor lived someone with skills that could turn their world upside down in ways they never imagined. This is a story about violation, fury, and the kind of revenge that reminds everyone why privacy matters and why underestimating someone can be the biggest mistake of your life. Hit subscribe now, because these stories of justice will keep you coming back for more, and join thousands who believe that sometimes the quiet ones have the loudest roar. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Emma Chen moved through Riverside High School like a shadow, her black hair perpetually falling across her face like a curtain she could hide behind. At 17, she had perfected the art of invisibility, keeping her head down in hallways crowded with students who seemed to navigate social hierarchies with an ease that felt foreign to her. Her oversized sweaters and worn jeans were chosen specifically to avoid attention, a stark contrast to the carefully curated outfits that dominated the school's Instagram feeds and TikTok videos. Emma's world was small by design, consisting of advanced placement classes where she excelled in silence, lunch periods spent in the library, and the few precious hours after school when she could escape to the one place where she truly felt alive. The Chen family martial arts studio sat tucked between a coffee shop and a dry cleaner on a quiet street 15 minutes from school, its modest storefront bearing the simple sign, Dragon's Path Martial Arts, in both English and Chinese characters. Emma's grandmother had started the studio 40 years ago, teaching traditional Taekwondo to neighborhood kids when the area was still rough and parents worried about their children walking home alone. Now, Emma's parents ran the day-to-day operations, while her older brother Marcus handled the business side remotely from his computer science program at Portland State. Emma had been training since she could walk, her grandmother's jade bracelet clicking softly against her wrist during every session, a constant reminder of the strength that flowed through generations of Chen women. But Emma kept this part of her life completely separate from school, where being different already felt like wearing a target. She had learned early that admitting to martial arts training would only invite questions, demonstrations, and the kind of attention that made her stomach clench with anxiety. Better to be seen as the quiet Asian girl who was good at math than to reveal the hours she spent perfecting kicks that could break boards, and the discipline that had earned her a second-degree black belt by age 16. Her parents respected her choice to keep this private, understanding that high school was already challenging enough without adding more ways for cruel classmates to single her out. The trouble had started small, as these things often do, with Tyler Brooks noticing her during third-period chemistry when she correctly answered a question that had stumped the rest of the class. Tyler was everything Emma wasn't, tall and confident, with an easy smile that had charmed teachers and students alike since elementary school. As Riverside's star basketball player, he occupied the highest tier of the social pyramid, surrounded by teammates and admirers who treated his every word like gospel. His girlfriend, Chloe Martinez, commanded nearly as much influence through her popular social media accounts, where she documented the daily dramas of teenage life for thousands of followers who hung on her every post. Emma first noticed their attention when Tyler began making comments about her appearance, seemingly innocent observations that carried an edge of mockery designed to get laughs from his friends. He would comment on her mysterious nature, wondering aloud what she was hiding behind all that hair, suggesting that maybe she was more interesting than she looked. Chloe joined in with backhanded compliments about Emma's natural look, implying that maybe some effort with makeup might help her fit in better. Their friend Ryan Walsh, who served as captain of the basketball team, added his own contributions by creating elaborate theories about Emma's home life, painting pictures of strict parents and cultural restrictions that explained her antisocial behavior. These interactions happened in public spaces where other students could witness them, and Emma recognized the calculated nature of their approach. They were building a narrative around her, turning her privacy into something suspicious, and her quiet nature into a source of entertainment. Each comment was delivered with enough plausible deniability that complaining would make her seem oversensitive. But the cumulative effect was designed to isolate her further and establish their right to scrutinize her life. Emma's friend Zoe urged her to report the harassment, but Emma knew that Tyler's status as a star athlete and Chloe's popularity would protect them from any meaningful consequences. The situation escalated when Chloe began speculating online about what Emma might be hiding, posting cryptic stories on her Instagram that hinted at secrets and encouraged her followers to pay attention to the mysterious girl in their chemistry class. Emma watched her follower count grow as curious students began looking for her in hallways, studying her behavior for clues about whatever drama Chloe was manufacturing. The attention made Emma's anxiety spike, transforming her safe spaces into stages where she felt constantly observed and judged. Emma's parents noticed her increased stress, but attributed it to normal academic pressure, unaware that their daughter was becoming the unwilling subject of social media speculation. Marcus, home for a weekend visit, observed his sister's jumpiness and pressed her for details, but Emma deflected his concerns with claims about upcoming exams and college preparation stress. She had always been the family's quiet achiever, handling problems internally rather than burdening others with her struggles, a trait that served her well in martial arts but left her isolated when facing social cruelty. The harassment followed, a predictable pattern of escalation, with Tyler and his friends testing boundaries to see how far they could push before Emma would react. They graduated from verbal comments to accidental physical contact, shoulder bumps in hallways that sent Emma's books scattering, and strategic positioning that forced her to walk around them or ask them to move. Each incident was designed to look coincidental to observers, while making Emma feel increasingly trapped and powerless in spaces where she had no choice but to exist. Emma's jade bracelet became her anchor during these encounters, the smooth stone warming under her fingers. As she practiced the breathing techniques her grandmother had taught her for managing anger and fear, the bracelet represented more than family tradition. It symbolized the strength and discipline that Emma carried within herself, hidden beneath layers of careful camouflage designed to keep her safe in a world that felt increasingly hostile to anyone who dared to be different. This is a straightforward creative writing request that doesn't require research. The user wants me to continue writing part 2 of their original story following the structure we've established. I'll proceed directly with the creative writing without using the research tool. The weeks that followed brought a calculated campaign of psychological warfare that Emma recognized but felt powerless to stop. Tyler and his crew had refined their approach, creating situations that pushed the boundaries of acceptable behavior while maintaining enough plausibility to avoid serious consequences. They would arrive at locations just before Emma, claiming the best seats in the cafeteria or positioning themselves strategically in study areas she frequented, forcing her to either confront them or find alternative spaces. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Their conversations grew louder when she was within earshot, discussing parties she wasn't invited to and social events that highlighted her outsider status. Chloe's social media presence became increasingly focused on what she termed high school mysteries, posting polls asking her followers to guess secrets about unnamed classmates and sharing cryptic photos that seemed to reference Emma without explicitly naming her. The posts generated hundreds of comments from students trying to decode the references, turning Emma's daily existence into a puzzle for others to solve. Emma found herself checking Chloe's accounts obsessively, watching her own life become content for someone else's entertainment while feeling completely helpless to make it stop. The basketball season was reaching its climax, with Riverside High advancing further into the state tournament than they had in years. Tyler's status as the team's leading scorer made him practically untouchable, with teachers and administrators treating him like a celebrity whose future college prospects were more important than any minor disciplinary issues. Emma watched from the sidelines as Tyler's confidence grew with each victory, his sense of invincibility extending beyond the basketball court into every aspect of his life. He began taking greater risks with his harassment, pushing boundaries that would have resulted in suspension for any other student. Ryan Walsh emerged as the group strategist, the one who planned their more elaborate schemes while maintaining careful distance from the execution. Emma recognized his intelligence and understood that he was the most dangerous member of the group because he understood consequences and worked to avoid them. While Tyler relied on his athletic status and Chloe used her social media influence, Ryan operated in the shadows, orchestrating situations that maximized Emma's discomfort while minimizing their own exposure to punishment. The school's locker room became a particular source of anxiety for Emma, who had already been uncomfortable with the communal changing area that offered little privacy. The girls' basketball team practiced immediately after school, filling the space with confident athletes who moved through the area with the easy comfort of people who had never questioned their right to exist in any space. Emma typically waited until the area was nearly empty before quickly changing for her walk home, but Tyler's group had begun timing their movements to coincide with her schedule. Chloe would linger in the hallway outside the locker room, ostensibly waiting for friends, but actually monitoring Emma's patterns. She would make comments about Emma's secretive behavior, wondering aloud why someone would be so paranoid about changing clothes unless they had something to hide. These observations were delivered with the fake concern that had become Chloe's signature, allowing her to plant seeds of suspicion while maintaining the appearance of innocent curiosity. Emma's martial arts training had taught her to recognize threat assessment and strategic positioning, skills that served her well in identifying the increasingly sophisticated nature of her tormentors' approach. She could see the way they coordinated their movements, the subtle signals they used to communicate, and the careful timing that made their harassment appear coincidental to casual observers. This recognition only heightened her frustration because she understood exactly what was happening while being unable to prove it to anyone who might help. The Chen family studio provided Emma's only real refuge during this period, a space where she could channel her growing anger and anxiety into productive physical activity. Her grandmother's teachings about emotional control and mental discipline became more relevant than ever as Emma struggled to maintain her composure in the face of escalating provocation. She found herself staying later at the studio, working through increasingly complex forms and sparring sessions that left her physically exhausted but mentally clear. Marcus noticed the change in his sister's training intensity during his weekend visits, observing that she was pushing herself harder than usual and displaying a level of aggression that seemed out of character. Emma's parents attributed this to normal teenage stress and the pressure of maintaining her academic excellence while preparing for college applications. They encouraged her dedication to martial arts as a healthy outlet for stress, unaware that their daughter was using physical training to prepare for a confrontation she hoped to avoid, but increasingly believed was inevitable. Emma's academic performance remained strong despite the emotional toll of constant harassment, but her teachers began noticing subtle changes in her classroom behavior. She became more withdrawn during group activities, choosing to work alone whenever possible, and avoiding the informal social interactions that typically occurred before and after classes. Her participation in class discussions declined as she worked to minimize any attention that might provide Tyler's group with new material for their ongoing campaign. The jade bracelet became Emma's constant companion during this period, its familiar weight providing comfort during the most difficult moments. She would trace its smooth surface during particularly stressful encounters, drawing strength from the connection to generations of strong women who had faced their own challenges with courage and determination. The bracelet represented more than family history. It symbolized the inner strength that Emma was learning to access as her situation became increasingly desperate. Zoe remained Emma's closest ally throughout this ordeal, though she felt increasingly frustrated by her friend's refusal to take more aggressive action against the harassment. Zoe urged Emma to document the incidents, to involve parents and school officials, to fight back in ways that might actually stop the behavior. Emma appreciated her friend's loyalty, but recognized that Zoe didn't fully understand the calculated nature of their tormentor's approach, or the way they had insulated themselves from consequences through careful planning and social positioning. The basketball team's continued success created an atmosphere of celebration and excitement throughout the school, with pep rallies and special events that elevated Tyler and his teammates to hero status. Emma watched from the margins as the entire school community rallied around the team, understanding that this environment made her situation even more precarious. Any complaint against Tyler would be seen as an attack on the school's championship hopes, while any confrontation would cast her as the villain who threatened their golden boy's future. Emma began to understand that she was trapped in a situation that would only escalate until something forced a resolution. Tyler's group had established a pattern of behavior that was becoming bolder with each successful provocation, and Emma recognized that they were building towards something more serious than verbal harassment or social media speculation. The question was whether she would wait for them to make their move or take control of the situation before they could spring whatever trap they were preparing. Tyler's confidence had reached dangerous heights by early March, when the state tournament victories made him feel genuinely invincible. His social media accounts overflowed with congratulatory messages and college recruitment interest, creating an echo chamber that reinforced his belief that normal rules didn't apply to him. The school administration treated him like visiting royalty, excusing missed classes and late assignments, while teachers competed to claim association with the rising star. This environment of unchecked privilege emboldened Tyler to escalate his harassment of Emma into territory that would have seemed unthinkable just months earlier. The group's tactics evolved from psychological harassment to what Emma recognized as stalking behavior, though executed with enough subtlety to avoid official scrutiny. Tyler would appear at locations where Emma typically spent time, claiming coincidence while making his presence impossible to ignore. He began commenting on her daily routines with an accuracy that suggested careful observation, mentioning her coffee shop visits, her library study sessions, and her after-school activities, with the casual air of someone who just happened to notice these details. Chloe's role expanded from social media agitator to intelligence gatherer, using her network of followers to crowdsource information about Emma's movements and activities. She would post innocent-seeming questions about study spots and hangout locations, then cross-reference the responses with Emma's known patterns to build a comprehensive map of her target's daily life. The collaborative nature of this surveillance made it feel like a game to Chloe's followers, who eagerly participated without understanding they were contributing to a harassment campaign. Ryan Walsh provided the strategic oversight that transformed random cruelty into systematic psychological warfare. He studied Emma's reactions to different provocations, cataloging which approaches generated the strongest responses and identifying the specific triggers that seemed to affect her most deeply. His analytical approach to harassment demonstrated an intelligence that made him particularly dangerous, as he understood how to maximize emotional damage while minimizing legal exposure. Emma's martial arts background gave her unique insight into the predatory behavior she was experiencing, recognizing patterns that might have escaped someone without training in threat assessment and situational awareness. She could see how Tyler's group was probing for weaknesses, testing her responses to determine how far they could push before encountering resistance. Their behavior followed classic intimidation tactics that her instructors had warned her about. Techniques designed to isolate targets and break down their psychological defenses. The school's locker room situation became increasingly precarious as Emma noticed Tyler's group coordinating their movements with her schedule in ways that couldn't possibly be coincidental. Chloe would arrive at the gymnasium just as Emma was preparing to leave, lingering in areas where she could observe the locker room entrance while pretending to wait for friends. Tyler and Ryan began appearing in hallways adjacent to the changing area, creating situations where Emma felt watched and vulnerable during what should have been private moments. Emma's attempts to alter her routine only resulted in the harassment adapting to her new patterns, demonstrating a level of surveillance that made her realize how comprehensively her movements were being monitored. When she changed her post-school timing, they adjusted accordingly. When she used different routes through the building, they anticipated her new paths. The persistence of their observation made Emma understand that this had moved beyond casual bullying into something more obsessive and potentially dangerous. The basketball team's advancement to the state finals created an atmosphere of hysteria throughout Riverside High, with local media attention and community celebration that elevated Tyler's status to mythical proportions. Emma watched newspaper interviews where Tyler was praised not just as an athlete, but as a role model and leader, understanding that his public image made any accusation against him seem impossible to believe. The community had invested so much emotional energy in the team's success that questioning Tyler's character would feel like attacking their collective dreams. Emma's family began noticing subtle changes in her behavior that went beyond normal teenage stress, though they initially attributed these signs to academic pressure and college preparation anxiety. She became hypervigilant about her surroundings, checking locks multiple times and positioning herself where she could see exits in any room. Her sleep patterns deteriorated as anxiety kept her awake, and she began losing weight as stress affected her appetite. These physical manifestations of psychological pressure were impossible to hide completely, though Emma worked hard to minimize their visibility. Marcus's visits home revealed a sister who seemed fundamentally changed from the confident martial artist he had known throughout their childhood. Emma's usual calm presence had been replaced by nervous energy and constant alertness that reminded him of soldiers returning from combat zones. When he pressed her for details about what was troubling her, Emma deflected with vague references to social drama and academic stress, unwilling to burden her family with problems she believed she should handle independently. The jade bracelet became Emma's anchor during increasingly difficult days. its smooth surface worn from constant contact as she sought comfort in the connection to her grandmother's strength. She found herself having imaginary conversations with her grandmother during particularly stressful moments, drawing on memories of lessons about facing adversity with dignity and courage. These internal dialogues provided emotional support, but also highlighted how isolated Emma had become from the living people who cared about her. Emma's academic performance remained excellent despite the emotional toll, but her teachers began commenting on subtle changes in her classroom presence. She participated less in discussions, avoided group projects when possible, and seemed constantly distracted by something beyond their lessons. Her English teacher noted that Emma's creative writing had become darker and more introspective, filled with themes of isolation and injustice that seemed to reflect personal experience rather than imagination. The harassment campaign began incorporating technology in ways that made Emma feel surveilled even outside school grounds. She noticed unknown accounts following her minimal social media presence, and Chloe began making references to details about Emma's life that could only have come from careful online stalking. The digital component of the harassment made Emma realize that the boundaries between her school life and private life had been completely eroded. Zoe's frustration with Emma's passive response reached a breaking point as she watched her best friend deteriorating under the sustained psychological assault. She began documenting incidents without Emma's knowledge, taking photos and screenshots that might serve as evidence if the situation escalated to the point where official intervention became necessary. Zoe's protective instincts made her increasingly angry with the school's failure to address what seemed obvious to anyone paying attention. Emma's training sessions at the family studio became more intense and focused as she unconsciously prepared for confrontation while consciously hoping to avoid it. Her forms became sharper, her sparring more aggressive, and her endurance training pushed beyond previous limits. She was honing skills that she had never intended to use outside the controlled environment of martial arts competition. Though she couldn't articulate why this preparation felt necessary, the situation had reached a point where Emma understood that waiting for the harassment to stop naturally was no longer realistic. Tyler's group had established a pattern of escalation that showed no signs of plateauing, and their increasing boldness suggested they were building towards some kind of climactic event that would either break her completely or force her to respond in ways that would change everything. The spring semester's final month brought an intensity to Riverside High that went beyond typical end-of-year energy. With the state championship game approaching, the entire school operated in a heightened state of excitement that made Tyler Brooks feel like he owned the building and everyone in it. His presence commanded attention in every space he entered, with students and teachers alike treating him as someone whose future success reflected well on the entire institution. This atmosphere of worship and deference created conditions where Tyler felt comfortable pushing boundaries that would have seemed impossible just a year earlier. Emma found herself trapped in an increasingly sophisticated web of surveillance and psychological manipulation that demonstrated just how much thought and planning her tormentors had invested in their campaign. Tyler had begun appearing at her family's martial arts studio, not as a customer, but as someone who happened to be in the neighborhood when she arrived or left. He would wave casually from across the street or make comments about the interesting businesses in the area, always maintaining enough distance to seem coincidental, while making his presence impossible to ignore. The studio represented Emma's last sanctuary, the one place where she had felt completely safe and authentic, and Tyler's intrusion into this space felt like a violation of sacred ground. Emma's parents noticed her increased anxiety about coming and going from the building, though they attributed her nervous glances and hurried movements to normal teenage self-consciousness rather than recognizing the signs of someone being stalked. The contamination of her safe space marked a new level of psychological warfare that pushed Emma closer to her breaking point. Chloe's social media strategy had evolved into what could only be described as a digital harassment campaign, though one executed with enough subtlety to avoid platform violations or school intervention. She began posting about the importance of authenticity and being true to yourself, accompanied by photos and videos that seemed to reference Emma without explicitly naming her. The posts generated engagement from hundreds of followers who understood. They were participating in some kind of inside joke or ongoing drama without fully grasping their role in someone else's torment. The comment sections of Chloe's posts became gathering places for speculation about Emma's life, with students sharing observations and theories that built a crowdsourced surveillance network. Someone would mention seeing Emma at the coffee shop with a book. Another would note her presence at the library during specific hours, and gradually a detailed picture of her movements and habits emerged in public forums where she had no control over the narrative being constructed about her existence. Ryan Walsh's strategic mind had identified the locker room situation as the ultimate opportunity for their campaign, recognizing that the combination of vulnerability, privacy, and potential for documentation created perfect conditions for delivering maximum psychological damage. He had studied the building's layout, the timing of different activities, and the security camera placement with the thoroughness of someone planning a military operation rather than a high school prank. The girls' basketball team's practice schedule provided cover for increased foot traffic near the locker room, making it easier for Tyler's group to position themselves in adjacent areas without arousing suspicion. Ryan realized that the chaos of tournament season, with its irregular schedules and heightened emotions, would provide additional camouflage for their planned escalation. The timing was perfect because everyone's attention would be focused on the championship games rather than monitoring the behavior of students who were supposed to be celebrating their school's success. Emma's heightened awareness, sharpened by years of martial arts training, made her increasingly conscious of being watched and followed. She could feel eyes on her during routine activities, notice when conversations stopped as she approached groups of students, and sense the artificial nature of encounters that were designed to seem casual. This hypervigilance exhausted her mentally and physically, creating a constant state of stress that affected her sleep, appetite, and ability to concentrate on anything beyond immediate survival. The psychological pressure began manifesting in physical symptoms that Emma couldn't completely hide from her family. She developed a persistent tension headache that made concentrating difficult. Her hands trembled slightly when she thought no one was watching, and she found herself startling at unexpected sounds or movements. These stress responses were familiar to her from martial arts training about fear and adrenaline, but experiencing them constantly throughout daily life was wearing down her reserves of emotional strength. Emma's grandmother's jade bracelet became a touchstone during the most difficult moments, its familiar weight and smooth texture providing comfort when everything else felt unstable and threatening. She would roll it between her fingers during class, press it against her palm when walking through hallways, and hold it tightly when trying to fall asleep despite racing thoughts and anxiety. The bracelet represented continuity with family strength and tradition, reminding her that she came from women who had faced adversity with courage and dignity. The basketball team's success had created an environment where questioning Tyler's behavior seemed almost treasonous to school spirit. Teachers who might normally intervene in harassment situations were reluctant to discipline someone whose athletic achievements brought positive attention to their school. Students who might have spoken up for Emma were caught up in championship fever and unwilling to risk social ostracism by opposing the popular athlete. This protective bubble around Tyler made Emma realize that official channels for addressing the harassment were essentially closed to her. Marcus's increasing concern about his sister's well-being led him to spend more time observing the family dynamics during his visits home. He noticed that Emma had become withdrawn from family conversations, seemed constantly distracted during meals, and displayed the kind of hypervigilance he associated with people under threat. His computer science background made him naturally suspicious of coincidences, and he began wondering if Emma's stress was related to specific events rather than general academic pressure. Emma's training sessions at the studio became more focused on practical self-defense techniques rather than traditional forms and competition preparation. She found herself gravitating toward drills that emphasized quick reactions, close-quarters combat, and techniques for escaping grabs or restraints. Her instructors noticed the shift in her focus, but attributed it to natural evolution in her training rather than preparation for actual confrontation. The school's administration had become so invested in the basketball team's success that they created an environment of permissiveness around the players that extended beyond academic exceptions to behavioral tolerance. Minor infractions that would result in suspension for other students were overlooked when committed by team members, and complaints about player behavior were often dismissed as jealousy or attempts to sabotage the championship run. This institutional protection made Emma understand that seeking help through official channels would likely backfire against her. Zoe's documentation of the harassment incidents had grown into a comprehensive file that included screenshots, photos, and detailed written accounts of each encounter. She was building a case that could be presented to authorities if the situation escalated beyond what Emma could handle alone, though she respected her friend's wish to avoid involving adults unless absolutely necessary. Zoe's preparation reflected her understanding that the harassment was following a pattern of escalation that suggested something more serious was approaching. The combination of psychological pressure, physical stress symptoms, and institutional indifference was pushing Emma toward a decision she had hoped to avoid. Her martial arts training had taught her that the best fight was the one you never had to have, but the escalating nature of the harassment and the failure of all peaceful solutions was making confrontation seem inevitable rather than avoidable. The championship game was 3 days away when Tyler decided it was time to execute the plan that Ryan had been perfecting for weeks. The school buzzed with pre-game energy that made everyone feel invincible, especially the basketball players, who had become local celebrities overnight. Tyler walked through hallways like he owned them, accepting congratulations and praise from teachers and students who treated him as if his success was somehow their own. This atmosphere of celebration and deference gave him the confidence to believe that whatever he did would be forgiven or overlooked in light of his athletic achievements. Emma's routine had become predictable out of necessity, as changing her patterns only resulted in the harassment adapting to follow her new schedule. She stayed late at the library most afternoons, waiting until the building was nearly empty before making her way to the locker room to change out of her school clothes and into the comfortable attire she wore for her walk home. The girls' basketball team had finished practice by then, leaving the changing area quiet and empty except for the occasional student gathering forgotten items from their lockers. Ryan had mapped out the security camera coverage throughout the school building, identifying blind spots and timing patterns that would allow them to position themselves without being recorded. The locker room had cameras in the main entrance area, but none inside the actual changing spaces, creating a zone where their planned action could occur without digital evidence. He had also studied the building's acoustics, understanding which areas carried sound and which provided natural sound dampening that would prevent their activities from being overheard. Chloe had prepared her phone with a new recording app that eliminated the telltale camera sound and optimized video quality for low-light conditions. She had practiced the timing and positioning needed to capture clear footage while maintaining enough distance to avoid immediate detection. The plan was to record Emma in a state of undress and then use the footage for social media humiliation that would destroy her reputation permanently. The violation would be complete and devastating, turning Emma's most vulnerable moment into entertainment for their followers. Tyler's role was to create the distraction and intimidation that would keep Emma from immediately realizing what was happening until it was too late to stop the recording. His physical presence and aggressive personality would overwhelm her natural defenses, while Chloe documented her humiliation from a concealed position. Ryan would serve as lookout and coordinator, ensuring that their timing was perfect and their escape route was clear before anyone could intervene or identify them as the perpetrators. Emma arrived at the locker room later than usual that Tuesday afternoon, having spent extra time in the library working on a college application essay that was due the following week. The hallways were emptier than normal, with most students having left for various after-school activities or simply heading home to prepare for the championship game excitement that would dominate the rest of the week. The quiet building felt different than usual, charged with an energy that made Emma's martial arts training instincts alert her to potential danger. The changing area appeared empty when Emma entered, though she noticed that several lockers were slightly ajar in ways that seemed deliberate rather than accidental. Her grandmother's jade bracelet felt warm against her wrist as she moved toward her usual corner location, a spot she had chosen because it provided maximum privacy and clear sightlines to all entrances. Something about the arrangement of backpacks and clothing in the space felt artificial, as if items had been positioned to create specific hiding spots or vantage points. Emma had begun removing her outer sweater when she heard the soft whisper of rubber soles against tile flooring, a sound that her training had taught her to recognize as someone attempting to move stealthily. Her body tensed automatically as years of martial arts discipline kicked in, heightening her awareness of her surroundings and preparing her nervous system for potential conflict. The jade bracelet seemed to pulse with warmth as she turned toward the sound, her movements careful and controlled despite the adrenaline beginning to flood her system. Tyler appeared first, stepping out from behind a row of lockers with the casual confidence of someone who believed he had already won whatever game he was playing. His smile carried the same predatory quality that Emma had learned to recognize during months of escalating harassment, but now it was coupled with an intensity that suggested something more serious than verbal taunting was about to occur. Behind him, Emma could see movement in her peripheral vision as other figures positioned themselves in the space, though she kept her primary focus on Tyler as the most immediate threat. Chloe emerged from her hiding position with phone already raised and recording, the device angled to capture Emma in her partially undressed state while remaining far enough away to avoid immediate retaliation. Her expression showed the excitement of someone who believed they were about to achieve a major victory, completely confident that their plan would unfold exactly as rehearsed. Ryan positioned himself near the main entrance, serving as both lookout and backup in case Emma attempted to flee rather than submit to their planned humiliation. Emma's martial arts training had prepared her for exactly this kind of situation, though she had never imagined she would need to use those skills against classmates in her own school. Her grandmother's voice echoed in her memory, reminding her that true strength came not from avoiding conflict, but from ending it quickly and decisively when peaceful solutions were no longer possible. The jade bracelet seemed to grow warmer against her skin as Emma made the split-second decision that would change everything for all of them. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out, and check them.